We are all in agreement that if we had sufficient funds to cater for all our expenses, most especially the large expenses, as and when they fell due, we will not be in debt. We also agree that debt delays your financial freedom journey. So how can you avoid debt? How can you shoulder or take care of your large expenses? Forget about the monthly groceries, forget about the utility bills, your regular utility bills. How can you take care of your large expenses? The ones that you already know. I'm not talking about emergencies. You can do this using sinking funds. So in this video, I am going to tell you about sinking funds. What are sinking funds? Which type of sinking funds can you have? Why should you have sinking funds? And where can you store or can you keep your sinking funds? And how do you form or how do you get a sinking fund? First and foremost, I'm going to request you to please subscribe to the channel. My name is Berlin. I am the proprietor of Wealthwise Hub and a mentor. Back to our discussion. What is a sinking fund? A sinking fund is money that you keep aside periodically or over a duration of time. And the intention of keeping aside this money is so that you can utilize it towards a specific known expenditure which you anticipate to incur. All right? A sinking fund is money you keep aside periodically. You save it. It's like a short savings, but with a purpose. The purpose is to spend it. All right? Sinking funds are different from emergency funds. Emergency funds are money that you save or that you keep aside, and the intention of keeping the emergency fund aside is so that you can use it for unknown future expenses, emergencies. However, sinking funds are for known, mostly large future expenditures. Now, sinking funds are not savings. They are different from savings. You save to build wealth. You save to accumulate wealth. But sinking funds, you save it with an intention of using it. It's a form of short saving, yes, but you save it with an intention of using it. So why do you need a sinking fund? Why do you need to keep money aside so that you can use it later? Why do you, if you know you're going to use it, why would you need to be keeping the money anyways? Right? Good question. Number one, sinking funds saves you from anxiety, financial anxiety. Have you ever been in a situation where you need to buy something or you need to pay for something, but you don't have the money to pay for it, and you get worried or you get panic attacks? Something like school fees. Schools are about to open. You don't have money to pay the school fees and you get into panic mode. Yeah? Sinking funds protects your emergency funds. How does it protect your emergency funds? When you have a bill which is due for payment, for instance, insurance, when you have a bill which is due for payment and you don't have money to pay for that bill, like the case of a car insurance, you are likely to go into your emergency fund and dilute that fund or deplete that fund, your emergency fund. So the sinking funds protects your emergency funds. Sinking funds also protects you from borrowing or from going deeper into debt. When schools are opening and you don't have money to pay for school fees, what are you likely to do? You're likely to borrow. If you don't have an emergency fund as yet, you're likely to borrow the monies. So you're going to, if the absence of sinking funds for that specific expenditure is likely to send you further into debt. All right? Financial anxiety protects your emergency fund, saves you from going further into debt. Sinking funds also gives you financial discipline. It helps you to attain financial discipline. But the mere virtue of the fact that you can set aside a specific amount of money consistently with the purpose or with the intention of using it at a later date for a specific expenditure, trust you me, Once you have paid for that expenditure, it's highly likely or highly possible that you can continue saving the same amount you have been pumping into your sinking fund now that that expenditure has been accommodated. It's highly possible that you can continue saving the amounts you had been saving, and that will go into your wealth building. Now, we know we have the monthly budgets or the weekly budgets. We know we have the regular budgets. However, this monthly budget that we have or that we undertake every month does not accommodate or does not cater for the future big expenses. What happens when you have been budgeting for the past 12 months and you get to a point where a large expense like your car insurance, the same example I have been using before, like your car insurance falls due, will you be in a position to pay for it from your monthly income, regular monthly income? If yes, well and good, then you don't need to set a sinking fund for it. However, if you're going to strain in making that payment, or if you're going to fall behind in other bills, if you made that large payment, then you may need to set a sinking fund for that debt, or I mean for that expenditure, so that you can accumulate funds or money over time, so that come the time when that expenditure is falling due, you'll have accumulated sufficient funds to shoulder that expense. Sinking funds, all right? What kind of sinking funds can we have? I've already talked about insurance, car insurance, sinking funds, right? I have talked about school fees, sinking funds. Another type of sinking funds will be a house insurance sinking fund or a newborn sinking fund. A newborn sinking fund is where you know you're expecting a baby a few months down the line or 9 months down the line from when you conceived. You are going to do newborn baby shopping, which is not a cheap expense. So, how do you prepare for that? You can either be doing the shopping slowly, or you can set a newborn sinking fund so that come 9 months later, you'll have accumulated enough monies or sufficient funds to cater for that specific known expense. Sinking funds. You can also use sinking funds to build up your emergency funds. If you don't have an emergency fund and you are on a financial freedom journey, or you just want to have the emergency funds, what do? You can set up an emergency fund, sinking fund, so that every month you put aside a specific amount of money in your emergency fund account so that it can accumulate into the amount you'd like to hold as your emergency funds. That's an emergency fund, sinking fund. You can also have an investment sinking fund. This is two ways, yeah? For individuals, now like myself, you can have an investment sinking fund. For example, you want to go into treasury bills or you want to go into treasury bonds. The minimum amount you need to invest is 50,000 shillings for the bonds or 100,000 shillings for the treasury bills. You're not able to raise that amount of money at once. What can you do? You can set a sinking fund so that every month you put aside maybe 10,000 shillings or 5,000 shillings, depending on your ability. So this money accumulates until it gets to 50,000 shillings, and then you buy your bond. Or it accumulates until it gets to 100,000 shillings, and then you buy your treasury bills. For the business people, for the entrepreneurs, you can use the sinking fund to acquire capital assets or for your capital expenditures. Capital expenditures are the expenditures that when you incur, they appear in your balance sheet and not in your balance sheet as an asset, and not as a working capital, nor in your P&L as an expenditure. So when you want to or to have a capital expenditure. For instance, you want to upgrade your machines. you can set up a sinking fund for that machine so that you accumulate money over time until it gets to the price of the machine in plus the installation cost. When it gets to that level, you can now go into the market and buy your machine. Sinking funds are very critical, both for individuals and entrepreneurs. Now, where can you keep these sinking funds? Would you believe that some of you already have sinking funds, but you do not know you have sinking funds? Our regular chamas, are you in any merry-go-round? That's a sinking fund. When you join a chama, so you can accumulate money, so you can be able to buy uh, a house appliance, for instance. You have a house appliance sinking fund. You have just formed a fridge sinking fund or a TV or a seat sinking fund, depending on whatever it is that you want to buy. Yeah. Every month, for the Chama case, every month you give somebody money. You put aside some amount of money. The next month you give somebody else. That's how Chamas work, isn't it? Yeah. So every month you put aside some amount of money. Now, in the case of sinking fund, you are not giving these monies to other people to keep them for you, only for them to give you the same amount at the end of the period or at the end of the 10 months or 12 months, whichever duration your Chama is. You can be keeping this money for yourself in a savings account. You can open a separate savings account. Now, the chama that I've just mentioned, that will be one way of having a sinking fund. Every month, you put aside some money by giving to different people so that these different people can give you back the money you had been giving them when your merry-go-round town has arisen. Yeah. That's one way of sinking fund. The second way is through opening a savings account, a second savings account. The third way, which is what I would highly recommend, is through a MMF. You open a money market account for that specific sinking fund, and there's nothing that stops you from opening 2 or 3 or 5 money market accounts with different fund managers. There's nothing that stops you from opening 2 or 3 or 4 different accounts with different banks or even with the same bank, for as long as you take care or you take caution of the bank charges, so that your sinking fund that you're saving does not become depleted with whatever bank charges that there could be. You could also use treasury bills to accumulate your sinking funds, especially if your installments or monthly installments or weekly installments are in excess of 50,000 shillings or 100,000 shillings. You can be buying treasury bills. You know, treasury bills mature within 90 days, 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. So you can be buying the 3 months treasury bill and accumulate them until the time when you'll be ready to, when you have accumulated enough to now acquire your asset or to achieve your goal. All right. So now I've shared with you the benefits of your sinking funds. I've told you the differences between sinking funds and emergency funds. I have shared with you the types of sinking funds, but one thing that you need to note with the type of sinking funds, it varies from person to person, depending on your lifestyle and depending on your needs. For instance, I am not expecting a newborn baby, so I have absolutely no reason to have a newborn sinking fund. I have a sinking fund for school fees, and I have a sinking fund for insurance, car insurance rather. I'm not planning to buy any home appliance, so I have no reason to keep a sinking fund for home appliances. So you can look at your budget, look at your expectations, look at your future expenses, and when you see or when you foresee a large expense which you'll not be in a position to cater for using your regular monthly income, you can set up a sinking fund for that expense. How do you set up a sinking fund? Good question. You need to plan upfront. For instance, if my insurance was due in December and I need to pay 60,000 shillings for that insurance, I can set up a sinking fund 6 months from December, say around June or May, thereabouts, so that every month I save 10,000 shillings with the anticipation that 6 months later I'll have accumulated 60,000 shillings. I'll have accumulated 60,000 shillings, which will be sufficient for me to now pay my insurance premium. Now, sinking funds are very critical. They are important budgeting tools. Now that you know about sinking funds, please share with me in the comment section any sinking fund that you have or what you think about sinking funds. And then don't forget to press the subscribe button so that YouTube can push out this video to more people.